أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. It's extremely humbling to be standing on this side of the audience. The sister said that you were here to listen to me, and I just want to correct that statement. We are here because of one reason, and that is what unites all of us and what brings all of our hearts together, and that is La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah is a very, very powerful concept. It is La ilaha illallah that transforms people. It is La ilaha illallah that changed a people who used to bury their girls alive into some of the greatest human beings that ever walked the earth. It is La ilaha illallah that heals the hearts. This concept of La ilaha illallah is at the very core of healing through the Quran. Because La ilaha illallah is not just a statement. We all know that La ilaha illallah is what we say to turn us from a disbeliever into a believer. We all know that La ilaha illallah is what we say many times a day in our prayers. But La ilaha illallah is not only a statement of the tongue. La ilaha illallah is a transformation and a revolution of the heart and the entire life, and then the entire society. Why is that? It is because of this concept actually frees us. One of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, when he came to bring the message of Islam, he summarized this concept and he said, I have come to free you from the slavery to the slave and bring you to the slavery of the Lord of the slave. That is La ilaha illallah. That is Islam. When we say Islam, we mean submission. When we say I am a Muslim, what we are saying is I have submitted. But we are not unique in this submission, because every human being, everything alive submits to something. Everything submits to something. The question is, what do you submit to? Don't think that you're not a slave. We are all slaves. We are all slaves. The question is, what are we slaves to? As Muslims, we have taken witness that we will only be slaves to our Creator. Because everyone is a slave to something, and there are some people who are slaves to money. And when I say they are slaves to money, it doesn't mean that money is actual physical chains around their hands. But when you say that a person is enslaved to money, it means that I love money most. It means that I would do anything to get more money. It means that the most important thing to me is money. And so if that is the case, then I am a slave to money. There are people who are slaves to status. They obviously do not pray to status. They do not bow to status. They are not chained physically by status. But it means that a person says that I love status most. That the most important motivation in my life, that my most important objective, that my greatest hope is in getting more status. And my greatest fear is in losing status. And in that way, that person becomes a slave to status. There are people who have enslaved themselves to the standards of society, to the beauty standards of society, to the fashion standards of society. They don't bow down to fashion. They don't worship fashion by praying to fashion. But they become slaves to fashion because they make fashion their number one priority. I dress because fashion says so. And when fashion says this is in style, we hear and we obey. And then fashion changes its mind. And now fashion says this is in style. We hear and we obey. This is when I have enslaved myself to fashion. When I enslave myself to the standards of society for my self-worth, for my beauty. When society says this is what is considered beautiful, and I submit to that, I have enslaved myself to society's standard of beauty. When society says I'm supposed to look this way, and I'm supposed to be this size, and I'm supposed to dress this way, and unless I look this way, and I'm this size, and I dress this way, then I don't have any worth. As women throughout the world, we have become enslaved in this way. We are told by magazines, we are told by ads, we are told by television, we are told by Hollywood and Bollywood and every other wood that our worth as human beings, as women, is measured by the way we look. It's measured by how skinny we are. It's measured in some cultures by how fair we are. And if we are fair enough and thin enough and pretty enough and attractive enough for men, then we think we have worth. And if we are not thin enough, if we are not fair enough, if we are not pretty enough and attractive enough, then we feel that we do not have worth. Allah has come and freed us from that slavery. We do not get dressed in the morning for any other reason than to be beautiful to our Creator. Because you can be beautiful to society or you can be beautiful to your Creator. And you make that decision every single time you get dressed. You make decisions at every moment of what you're going to worship and what you're going to enslave yourself to. Everyone is a slave to something, except that we as Muslims, Allah has come and freed us. He has freed us through La ilaha illallah. Because La ilaha illallah means that there is nothing that I will enslave myself to. There is nothing that will define my purpose and my worth. There is nothing that I will put at the center of my existence except for God, except for my Creator. And that is La ilaha illallah. And that is what frees us from the slavery to the slave and brings us to the slavery of the Lord of the slave. The Quran is a healing for every disease. The Quran is a healing for society's diseases. The Quran is a healing for our emotional diseases. The Quran is a healing for our relationship diseases. And if we look into the Quran, we find these healings. One example, often what makes us broken inside, what becomes a barrier to our healing, is that we go through things that hurt us, that we go through hardship, that we go through loss, that we go through trials, that we go through tragedy, This is a natural part of this life. There is not a single human being who will live this life without going through some sort of hardship, without going through some sort of trial, without going through some sort of loss. It is the nature of dunya. But the Quran gives us a healing for these things. The Quran gives us a healing for loss. The Quran gives us a healing for hardship. You know why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, عَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. It may be that you hate something and it is good for you. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the Quran, has given us a completely different lens to see the world. Now all of a sudden, those things that we thought were bad for us, we realize that in fact, they could be good for us. Even if it means losing something we love. We all will go through loss of something that we love. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us this in the Quran. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. Allah tells us, Allah warns us, Allah prepares us. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ. We will indeed test you. Indeed. بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ. With something of fear. See, the fear that we experience in this life is only a glimpse of true fear. It's only a glimpse. It is just shay'un min al-khawf. It is just a piece, a bit of fear. Because real fear is when we are, wa'a'udhu billah, real fear is when a person is standing about to enter hellfire. That is real fear. Real fear is standing on the day of judgment bare. We in this life experience just a glimpse of what fear, of what real fear is like. Yes, we feel afraid in this life. Allah shows us just a little bit, a little glimpse of what fear is like. Real fear. And so He tells us, you will surely be tested. You know, if someone is warning you of something, clearly warning you, then how then can you be surprised when it happens? Right? Allah is warning us. So how then can we be surprised when it happens? And yet we get surprised, don't we? We get surprised that we were tested. We get surprised that we're afraid. We get surprised that something was taken from us. We get surprised. But if we read the Quran and reflect on the Quran and then absorb the Quranic paradigm into our hearts, it changes the way we view the world. Now all of a sudden we aren't surprised. We aren't surprised. In fact, we expect it. Why do we expect it? Because Allah said so. Allah said, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ. Our Creator has warned us, has prepared us, that we will surely be tested of something of fear and something of hunger. Again, the hunger of this life is only a glimpse of real hunger. When a person is in hellfire and has nothing to drink except boiling water, what we experience in this life is nothing compared to that. And we ask Allah for protection. But Allah gives us a glimpse. Shay'un min al-khawfi wal-ju'a. So something of fear and hunger. And then comes the loss. And then Allah gives us a glimpse, gives us something. He tests us with something of loss. Do we lose things in this life? Anyone ever lost something? We are always losing something. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Al-Asr, Wal-Asr, He swears by time that innal insana lafi khusr, that indeed mankind is in a state of loss. We're always losing something. We lose time, we lose health, we lose beauty, we lose intellect. Every minute that we live, every day that we live is closer to what? To losing those things. I am coming closer to losing my health, my youth, my intellect, everything. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. But there is a group of people who are saved from loss. Capital L. Now we lose things of dunya. That's a fact. But the ultimate loss, capital L, is not for the believers. Because the believers, they don't lose. You know why? Whatever they lose of dunya is saved for them. Whatever they lose of dunya is saved for them with Allah, if they are believers. And so Allah tells us that there's one group of people who are saved from this loss. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Except for those who believe. We have to believe. We have to believe to be able to hold on to anything from this life. If we do not believe, then we will lose everything. Everything. You will not hold on to your money. Your money will not come to you in your grave, except in one situation. In fact, two situations. When that money is used for the sake of Allah, when that money is used for a sadaqah, for a charity that continues to benefit others, it actually comes back in your grave. You want your money to come with you to your grave? Use it for Allah. Use it, give it. Because the money that you hold on to, you lose. Have you ever heard of anyone taking their money with them in their grave? Even if they tried, it would disintegrate, wouldn't it? It's paper. But there's only one way to hold on to that money. Give it for Allah. Give it for Allah and it will come back to you in your grave. As the Prophet ﷺ said, that there are three things that continue to benefit us in our grave. And one of them is the sadaqah, jariyah, the sadaqah, the charity that continues to benefit people even after we die. You want to hold on to your money? You give it. And so there is one group of people who are saved from loss. The first characteristic is that they are those who believe. If you want to hold on to what you have to believe. But belief alone is not enough. Allah tells us the second characteristic in Surah Al-Asr. الَّذِينَ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. And they do righteous deeds. It is not enough for you to say that my iman is in my heart, but it doesn't show up in my actions. It's not enough. Because anytime something is in your heart, it necessarily shows in your action. When you love someone, it shows in your actions. And when you don't care about someone, it shows in your actions. When you are sincere, when you are humble, when you are miserly inside, it shows in your actions. And yet we try to say that we have iman in our hearts and we love Allah in our hearts, but it doesn't show in our actions. That is a contradiction. When you really have love in your heart, it must show in your actions. Can I prove it to you? A mother's love for her child. We all agree that mothers love their children, correct? This is just one of those things. Believer, non-believer, atheist, agnostic, mothers love their children. So can a mother say, yes, I love my child, but I left my child on the doorstep to starve? But I love my child. I'm overflowing with love for my child, but I neglected my child on the doorstep. That is a contradiction of love. You see the love of a mother in her actions because she'll stay up all night with her child if she needs to. She will lose sleep. She will give up everything for her child. You see that love in action. And yet we say, I love Allah. I love Rasulullah. I have iman. I have love in my heart, but it doesn't show in our actions. How can I say I love Allah, but I am not interested in pleasing Him? When was the last time you loved someone and were not interested in pleasing them? When you really love someone, you go out of your way to please them, don't you? Look at a person who's in love, right? Object of love says jump. Person in love says how high, right? When you're in love with someone, you do whatever makes them happy. That's why love is such a powerful force. It is such a powerful force. And that is exactly why we have to be so careful what we love most. Because whatever you and I love most becomes our master. It owns us. It owns us. We will give anything for the thing that we love most. That's why it's so dangerous to love money most. That's why it's so dangerous to love status most. That's why it's so dangerous to love the creation more than the Creator. Because that object of love, whatever we love most, becomes our master. And so we cannot say we are spiritual but not religious. To say I am spiritual but not religious is as if I am saying I love God. I am in love with God, but I have no interest in following His rules. I love God and I feel high with that love, but I have no interest in doing what pleases Him. What is in my heart must show in action. So Allah tells us that the ones who are saved from loss are those who believe and do righteous deeds. It is not enough to say the hijab is in my heart, that I'm praying in my heart, that the iman is in my heart, but it is not showing in my actions. It is not enough to say that I am so God-fearing, but I treat my family badly. But I treat the people around me rudely. Because Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam told us that when the heart is rectified, the entire body becomes rectified. And he said, خَيْرُكُمْ خَيْرٌ لِأَهْلِهِ. The best of you are those who are best to their families. And yet we think that we can be religious by dressing religious, by having a big beard and a big abaya, but it doesn't show in our treatment of others. That's a contradiction. It's a contradiction of the pure state of the heart. When the heart is clean, it shows in our actions. It shows in how we treat people. Look at the example of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, the best of you are best to your families. And I am best to my family. He was the best of us, and so he was best to his family. So if you want to know, how is my heart? How is my iman? How is this process going of my spirituality? You need to look at your actions. You need to look at how you treat people, especially those nearest to you, especially your own family. Why? Because this is what Rasulullah ﷺ said. He said, this is the gauge. You want to know the gauge of who are the best of you? Those who are best to their families. Not those who can be the best in public. Not those who can be the best only at the masjid, and when they come home, they're monsters. They give their best to the people, in public. They give their best to the people at work, to the people at the masjid. But as soon as they step home, that's when they give their worst. It's supposed to be that you give your best to your family. So this belief needs to be applied in action. And so Allah tells us, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. The second part of this equation, how you and I can save ourselves from complete loss, is not only believing and then putting that belief into action, but we need to become a force of good for our families and our communities and our society. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ. That they enjoin one another to truth. We have to be a voice of truth. We have to be a people who stand up for justice. We don't just practice in our homes. We have to be a force in society for good and for truth. That's what tawasaw bil haqqi means. It is not enough to just believe and do good deeds in your home and that's it. And you don't take a stand for your society and for your community and for your families and for other people. That's part of this process. So you need to be a force for good in society. Enjoin one another to truth. Care about people. Care about your society. And then finally, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. And they enjoin one another to patience. See, the thing is about this path, the path of faith and good deeds and enjoining one another to truth necessitates patience. It requires a huge amount of patience. You will not be able to be successful in the first three of these criteria, right? Belief, good work, good actions, and enjoining truth, and calling one another to truth. You will not be able to be successful in those three unless you have patience. A lot of patience. And enjoin patience, that we have to support each other in patience. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us this worldview. This is a healing, because when we read and internalize the Quran, we start to see our lives completely differently. We start to see our hardships completely differently. And we go back and we see that Allah has already prepared us, that Allah has already warned us that we will be tested. That we will be tested in something of fear and hunger and loss. What will we lose? شيء ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات. And loss of wealth, souls, and fruits of our labor, fruits of our toil. When you go through your life and you lose some money, the one who does not have the Islamic paradigm, does not have the Quranic paradigm, will say, why me? This isn't fair. The one who does not have this healing from the Quran will be shocked that they lost money and will be angry and may be absolutely devastated to the extent that they don't want to live anymore. There are people who end their lives because they lost money. This is an extreme. But this happened because there wasn't that understanding that Allah has already prepared us for. That there will be loss of wealth and souls. When we lose someone that we love, without this understanding that Allah has already prepared us, that Allah has already warned us, we might react with anger and devastation. And finally, loss in the fruits of our toil. Have you ever put in so much effort into something and gotten no results? Have you ever put in so much effort into something and it just didn't work out the way you wanted? I think it's happened to all of us. And so Allah is also telling us that you will be tested in that. You will be tested in the result not being the way you want. That the fruits of your toil, the fruits of your labor, the results, in other words, will be lost. This is a test. And then finally, Allah gives us some really great news. He says, وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ, and give glad tidings to those who have patience. Now, have you ever seen someone going through like a massive hardship and you go up to them and say, "Congratulations, brother, congratulations, sister"? We don't usually do that, right? Doesn't usually work that way. But that's almost what the ayah is saying, isn't it? Allah is saying, وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. He is saying that this is going to happen. You're going to be tested. You're going to go through hardship. And then after saying that, He says, give glad tidings to the patient ones. So He is saying that you go through these things, and He is saying glad tidings to you. We would never think this way without this Quranic healing. We would never see a hardship or a loss in wealth and people and results as something good. And yet Allah says, give glad tidings to the patient ones. So you see how it completely changes the way we understand the world and then the way we understand our lives. Then Allah tells us, who are these patient ones that He is congratulating? الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّ لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّ إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. You want to be among those people who Allah is giving glad tidings to? Then do this. When a hardship comes to you in whatever form, you respond with Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Indeed, we belong to Allah, and to Allah is our return. You see, this statement is not only a statement of the tongue. This is an entire attitude. This is an entire paradigm. This is an entire way to see the world. And it begins with Inna lillah. It begins with, we all belong to Allah. This is essential. Wherever you believe you belong, whoever you think owns everything you have, that is where you are going to believe is the rightful return. So for example, if I own a car and I let you borrow it, simple example, I own a car and I let you borrow it. And I am a generous person, suppose, may Allah make us so. So I let you keep the car for 20 years. Okay, it's like getting old now. 20 years, it's still running, alhamdulillah. I don't know if that's possible, but. Now, after all these years, I come back to you and now I want to take my car back. What is your response? Well, you will have one of two responses, depending on something fundamental. If you remembered that the car belongs to me, when I come back, even after all those years, and take it back, you say, it belonged to you, and to you it returns. Correct? But what if you forgot? What if you forgot that it belonged to me? And somewhere along the line, you thought it belonged to you. You got amnesia somewhere, and you thought it belongs to me. It's my car, it's really nice. So what's your response when I come to take it back? Now your response is completely different. Now your response is, how could you do this to me? Give me back my car. How dare you take my car? Do you understand? Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Indeed, we belong to Allah, and to Allah is our return, is only an attitude that we can have if we remember that everything belongs to Allah. What does that include? It includes my own health, my own body, my own children. May Allah never test us in our children. My own spouse, my money, my intellect, my strength, my power, all of it belongs to me or to Allah? To Allah. So when Allah tests me and takes just one of His infinite gifts back, what is my response? My response will depend on how I view the ownership of that gift. Allah tells us that the patient ones are those who, when they are afflicted, they say, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Indeed, we belong to Allah, and to Allah we return. أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم وأولئك هم المهتدون. Those will have the blessings of Allah and the mercy of Allah, and they will be the rightly guided. Right now, Allah has given us, He has made almost like a transaction with us. He says that He will test us. He will take things from us sometimes, things that never belonged to us anyway. They were gifts. They were gifts. And we are borrowing them. It's a loan. It is a loan. And when He takes it back, He is going to test us. And if we have the response of patience and inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, then in exchange, He gives us something priceless. Can you imagine this transaction? It's really amazing, actually. If I go back to the example of the car, I let you borrow my car, right? I came back and I took it. And I make a deal with you. If you patiently endure me taking my own car back, I, in response to that, will give you $100 billion. That's my deal. All you have to do is be patient about me taking something that belongs to me anyways. And in exchange for your patience, I'm going to give you $100 billion. Wow, that's quite a deal, right? Right? That's an intense deal, right? Allah is making a better deal with us. A better deal than that. In exchange for our patience, when He takes back what already belonged to Him anyways, He gives us something not worth $100 billion, but something absolutely priceless, something infinite. The blessings, mercy, and guidance of Allah. You can't put a price tag on that. In exchange for our patience, Allah gives us forever. He gives us infinity. Isn't that that's a deal. That's a deal, right? We like sales, right? We like to go to the mall and get a sale. Everyone likes to get a deal, right? You know, like when you go to the mall and you're like, I got this, laptop, and it was like originally $1,500 and like I got it for $25. You'd be like really happy, right? And everyone would think that you're really cool, right? You go and there's a dress and it's like $2,000, you get it for a penny. Whoa, I got a deal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making a deal with us that can't be even compared to this. We give something so small called patience, and in exchange He gives us infinity. Allah is so generous. He's taking back what belongs to Him and then rewarding us for it. Look at that generosity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, how did this all happen? How did something that is normally seen as a tragedy become a source of infinite reward, of infinite blessings? It came through the healing of the Quran. It came through this lens, this Quranic paradigm that we would not have had without the Quran. The Quran changes, it transforms the way we interact with our lives and with this whole world. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a healing for the emotional struggles that we go through. There are two emotions that we struggle with in this world. Two main emotions. And if you look at within psychology, if you look at even just which psychological disorders and then which medications most people take, you will find that they fall into two categories. One is depression, and one is anxiety disorders. Depression and anxiety. In other words, sadness and fear, despair and fear. Allah has given us a healing in the Quran for these two emotions. When you look at the emotion of sadness and despair, one of the reasons why we fall into despair is because we believe that bad things are happening to us. But can you imagine a paradigm where you know that bad things never happen to you? Can you imagine that? You'd never be sad, right? You would never need to be sad. If I told you, if I guaranteed that no bad thing would ever happen to you, would you ever need to be sad? You know that the Prophet ﷺ told us this. He already told us that bad things don't happen to the believers. But then you're going to say, wait a minute, but that's not true, because we lose things and we get hurt and yes, we go through hardship, but it's not bad. Yes, we go through hardship, but the Prophet ﷺ said, the matter of a believer is strange. This is why it's strange, because you're going to say, but wait a minute, bad things do happen to believers. So I don't understand what you mean bad things don't happen. The Prophet ﷺ said, عَجَبٌ لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ. The matters of a believer are strange. أَمْرُهُ كُلُّ خَيْرٍ. His matters are all good. You guys, can you reflect on that for a second? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is telling you and me that if, and this is a capital IF, right? If we are believers, truly believers, then everything is good for us. Whoa. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand what that means? It means no matter what happens in your life, it's good for you. Do you understand the power of that? The power of that. So nothing can make you despair. Nothing, because everything's good for you. عَجَبٌ لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ. That the matters of a believer are strange. Everything is good for him. And you know what the Prophet ﷺ says about this? He says, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, this is only the case for a believer. Only for a believer. If something that he loves happens, he is grateful, so it is good for him. If something that he does not want, or a hardship comes, he is patient, so it is good for him. Do you understand the revolutionary nature of this concept? Meaning that no matter what happens in my life, I gain money, I lose money. I gain status, I lose status. I gain health, I lose health. I get people, I lose people. That it is all good for me? So there is no reason for me to despair about anything, because it's all good for me. And I, as a believer, just need to be between the wings of gratitude and patience. When it is time for me to be patient, I am patient. And when it's time for me to be thankful, I am thankful. And in that way, no matter what happens to me, it's always good for me. I will always be rewarded. It will always be for my own good and a purification, only if I'm a believer. This is honestly a revolutionary concept that takes away the idea of despair. This is a healing. This is a healing for sadness and depression of the deep, paralyzing type. Yes, we will still feel sadness, but that paralyzing despair, this is a healing for that. Because everything is good for you. Lastly, there is anxiety. Anxiety is one of those emotions that can become a prison for people. Fear. Fear. It's one of the worst emotions ever. Terror. Allah has given us a healing for terror. And you know what it's called? Tawakkul. It's a healing for fear. You know why? Because tawakkul means that I put my trust in Allah. Now imagine that you have entrusted someone with your money, entrusted someone with your property, and it is someone who you are 150% sure that they would never ever betray your trust. Are you going to sit and be anxious and be worried about your money and your property? Yes or no? No. I entrusted this person, and this person would never betray my trust, and this person will protect what I gave them. I am not afraid anymore. But what if you don't trust the one you have entrusted? What if you're not really sure if they're going to protect what you have given them? Are you going to be anxious? Yes. You're going to be constantly worried. Constantly worried. What's going to happen to my money? What's going to happen to my property? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? Isn't this how we act? Isn't this how we act? We are always scared of what's going to happen to our dunya, right? Always thinking of different scenarios of how we might be harmed, correct? How we might lose something, how someone might hurt us, how someone might degrade us or say something bad about us or think bad about us or spread bad things about us or harm our children or take our property. We are constantly afraid. Why does that happen? Because we have not entrusted someone who we know will take care of everything. Who is that? Al-Wakil. Allah, one of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Wakil, the trustee. Remember I talked about the person you entrusted as a trustee for your money and your property? That's a human being. And sometimes they might mess up. They could lose your property. They could fall asleep on the job. They could decide they want it for themselves. Lots of things could happen. Allah doesn't lose anything. Allah doesn't fall asleep. Allah doesn't become weak. Allah owns everything. Can you imagine if the one you have entrusted is the owner? Can you understand? So imagine that your trustee, meaning your protector, is actually the owner of what you are afraid of losing. How could you be afraid? If you have entrusted the owner of the heavens and the earth, how can you be afraid? If nothing can happen in the entire universe without his knowledge and permission, how can you be afraid? If you know that not even a leaf can fall from a tree anywhere without his knowledge and permission, then how can you be afraid that you're going to get harmed? Or that you're going to lose something and not be able to handle it? No harm, no true harm can come to a believer. Even when it looks like harm on the outside, even when it looks like it's painful and it's loss, it's always good for you if you are a believer. And if you entrust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you have just healed yourself from that paralyzing emotion of fear. It is a healing for the prison of fear. Because you know that I have entrusted the owner of the heavens and the earth. How can you not entrust him? And when you entrust him, how can you worry after that? أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم إنه غفور رحيم سبحانك الله وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليه والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.